arriving in U.S. mail from St. Louis in the original de Havilland DH-4 biplane in 10 bulky gunny sacks are the combined audiobook renditions and supplemental background information as presented in podcast form by moi, me, Robert P. Fitton. Good evening to one and all, wherever in the galaxy you make your home. Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, on the precipice of time itself. Tonight, Patch Kincaid is also on the cusp. Alarms are sounding all over the complex as Patch and Kate are awakened to the nuclear threat. Reports are coming in from around the country. Compounding the unfathomable situation is Carlos Sánchez and his terrorist gang, who are threatening to enter Sector 13 at the heavy doors. Kate clings on to Patch as the threat intensifies. Patch brings Kate down to the embarking chamber as a power-up is attempted. In the midst of this disaster, things take a turn for the worst, with only one strategy in place. Get back in time a few weeks to warn the world of the pending cataclysm. And now, we head back to the emergency alarms sounding throughout Sector 13 in Hastings Mountain, Colorado. Our second installment of The Kennedy Paradox by Robert P. Fitton. The Kennedy Paradox, Chapter 5. Sector 13, Hastings Mountain, Colorado. Personnel Quarters, July 19th, 1986, 3:15 a.m. Patch felt a nudge on his arm. In the dim light, a helmeted soldier with a rifle and bulky backpack hovered over him. Kate slept soundly in the next bed. "Sir, I'm Lieutenant McMasters from the 4th Infantry Division." The green digits on the bureau clock read 3:15 a.m. "If you're here, Lieutenant," he said, still dressed as he stood. Kate sat up. "You must have a problem. What happened?" "Sir, Ray Meinkewitz has just instructed me to inform you that a nuclear device has just detonated in New York City." A cold chill covered his skin as his heart thumped. "You need to report to the UCA immediately." "Patch," said Kate as she hugged him. He held her arms. "Let's get up there." They followed the lieutenant in silence through the doorway and toward the corridor's concrete stairs. The adrenaline in his blood surged as they ascended the stairwell. Millions of innocent people alive in Yonkers, the Bronx, and Brooklyn, when he and Kate had fallen asleep, had just perished in a cataclysmic fireball. The technicians striking the computer keyboards provided the only sound upstairs. Meinkewitz and Harrington, surrounded by everyone in the complex, stood near a row of monitors. Trays with half-eaten food and empty Coke cans littered the counter. Patch edged his way closer and peered at the news channel broadcast. A shaken young reporter stood at a West Coast location. His teary eyes wandered as he forced words into the camera.
At 2:49 Eastern Daylight Time. Again, this will be recorded as one of the worst.
He turned away and the screen switched to a different fresh reporter 300 miles away.
Ladies and gentlemen, World News reported some 22 minutes ago. The city of New York was decimated by a nuclear explosion at 2:49 this morning. There's no viable way at this time to assess the damage and the destruction from this god-awful event. World News has obtained this video, which we will now play for you.
Meinkewitz spoke in a low voice. "Somebody leaked this report. These bastards shouldn't even be showing this to the general public." "Agreed," answered Patch. Meikowitz's face tightened as he looked up. "Now you know, Patch." Patch nodded and pulled Kate closer as a recorded video from a Long Island rooftop appeared on monitor number 6. Across the East River, the sporadically lit buildings of Midtown Manhattan vanished in an extraordinarily bright flash. Sweat accumulated on Patch's forehead as a convoluted orange mass expanded upward into the night.
This is not a fabrication. Again, World News is reporting that the city of New York tonight, July 19th, 1986, was destroyed in a nuclear explosion. I have with me Professor Henry Younes from the University of California at Berkeley. Joining Mr. Younes is retired general in the United States Army.
That's Hillsdale, said Harrington. Lucky that General Hillsdale's up there, said Patch. Well, what the hell can he do now? Asked Meinkewitz, holding his cigar between his fingers. The reporter thrust the microphone toward the general with the thin mustache.
General Hillsdale, is there any way of telling who could have survived this nuclear blast?
Hillsdale's stars shined on his green helmet, and he wore a heavily quilted vest.
Well, it's too much to begin to assess the damage, Bill. My concern is for the living on the outskirts of the city and downrange. Have we personnel heading to the area, General? We will be holding a briefing this morning at 9 a.m. Right now, I cannot comment on the logistics. With the carnage involved, you can understand. Which leads to my next question. Dr. Younes, is the death count going to be in the millions?
Younes' bald head glared in the camera light, and his analytical voice sounded like an overdub on a documentary.
Well, Bill, it would have been far greater if this had occurred during the workday. The workforce in the greater New York area... Excuse me.
The reporter listened in his earpiece. His eyes slowly opened and his face became rigid.
My God. What is it?
Asked Hillsdale, his face tightening. Then he turned to several men behind him.
We have just learned that a second bomb...
Meinkewitz glared at Patch and then turned toward the screen.
The nation's capital has been destroyed by a second terrorist blast.
Meinkewitz, his eyes fixed on the screen, walked away. For at least 5 minutes, no one said anything. Meinkewitz returned with an open Bible. He faced the screen. The destroyer comes upon every city. Not a city escapes. Ruined is the valley. Wasted is the plain, as the Lord has said. Set up a memorial to Moab, for it is an utter wasteland. Its cities are turned into ruins, where no one dwells. He wiped a single tear from his unshaven cheek. Jeremiah, chapter 48, verses 8 and 9. The room remained silent until another technician called out. Our channels are sporadic. We are having transmission problems, Ray. I understand, said Meinkewitz, hanging his head. We can check our microwave antennas. Kate cried softly into Patch's shoulder as he wrapped his arm around her. His queasy stomach correctly gauged the depth of this surrealistic nightmare. All feeds from the public and military sectors vanished. The news channel blinked. A still video shot of the moon over a silver-rippled ocean filled every monitor. Meinkewitz stepped in front of the group. I don't think they're going to say any more. Patch leaned toward him. What are you saying? Harrington jolted Meinkewitz. He's saying that more cities will fall. Meinkewitz cleared his throat and tightened his brow. All right, listen up. What happened this morning is real. We have to do what we can do right here. One of the men at the communications desk rushed across the room and handed a piece of paper to him. Meinkewitz winced and his heavy eyes closed. He gritted his teeth and ordered the men back to the monitors for more information. Patch moved closer. You're going to commence Sector 13 power-up operations, aren't you, Ray? That is exactly what I'm going to do, Patch. I'm going to prevent this nightmare from ever happening. He motioned for Harrington to follow him. The two men disappeared into the main elevators. Kate looked up at Patch and dabbed her eyes with a Kleenex. Then she held him again. Her bewildered look magnified the horror. All dead. Patch inhaled. I have to stop them. How? This place, Patch, what is it? Some kind of missile defense system? What is Sector 13? It used to be a missile defense system. But what is it now? Kate, the activity in this place since the late 1960s, not always at this location, has been involved in time displacement experiments. That won't help anybody now. It might. She tilted her head back in disbelief. How so? Military applications, Kate. I've been back in time for short periods, twice. We may be able to do something here. Kate squinted. Patch questioned whether he could take her below, but the need for security clearances had ended with the annihilation of New York City. He pictured her 72nd Street apartment and walking through Central Park in the fall. Only the memories remained now. Come with me, Kate. Kate took his hand and she pensively entered the elevator, probably needing time to digest what he had said. Patch pushed the worn black button marked TDC and they dropped downward. Then she suddenly turned to him. How is this possible, Patch? This is 1986, not 5186. Patch raised his left brow with a mindful arrogance. We've been able to produce dimensional fields that bring us between the realm of our own time and space, like a bubble going back, like the elevator you're in now, moving through the carved space in a mountain rock. A similar effect occurs in the TDC. TDC? Time Displacement Chamber, the embarking chamber. She closed her eyes for a second. They emerged below the command center. Several minutes later, the doors opened to a multi-tiered, sheeny green pyramid constructed atop a red, glowing metal grid. The place hummed like a ship's engine room. A long, sloping tunnel connected the chamber pyramid apex to the lower control area. Patch thought the LCA resembled a baseball press box. They walked inside, dwarfed by the immensity of the complex, hollowed out of the surrounding gray rock ledges. He brought her up an open concrete stairway to Meinkewitz. After passing several additional monitoring stations, he approached Meinkewitz. Meinkewitz worked with his people at the computers, trying to initiate a chamber power-up. Ray, we have to keep sending our people back till we've changed the future. Meinkewitz firmly put his hand on Patch's shoulder. If the future can be changed, we may never know. It will just change. We have to assume that what we're doing is the right thing, Patch. Another report came in. Meinkewitz studied the computer readings as he spoke in a low, melancholic tone. You two would be dead right now. Kate closed her eyes. San Francisco. We are witnessing a complete destruction. Meinkewitz leaned over the technician's shoulder. I frankly don't want to hear any more. There's not a damn thing we can do about any of this except go back a few weeks and try and change it. He turned to Kate. Kate, I need to talk to Patch for a second. Kate locked her arms briefly around Patch. Meinkewitz apologized to Kate and motioned Patch into a side room and shut the glass door. I don't like leaving Kate out there. Who the hell's she gonna tell now anyways? Just listen up, will you? Meinkewitz clenched his fist as he thought. Patch took a long breath, but his own emotions surged. These attacks have to be more than Carlos Sánchez and the other people. Higgins, Bornheim, and Carlos are at the center of it. Every major American city has been hit. Our country, our way of life, is over. Through the glass, Kate sat with her head bowed. Emotions had been raised to an incomprehensible level. He faced Meinkewitz. So what's your plan, Ray? Meinkewitz regained his calm demeanor. Powering up this system will take 6 hours, if we still have electricity. Denver hasn't been hit yet. I'm bringing Kate inside the chamber when we're powered up. As a matter of fact, she's coming back with me. Patch, you have to establish your priorities. I thought I just did that. He kicked open the door and hurried over to Kate and held her shoulders. I'm going back in time to warn everyone you're coming with me. Incomprehensible confusion resided in her eyes. Back in time? I can't even absorb the fact that everyone is dead in New York. We need to take action. I don't care about these gizmos you hotshots have up here, okay? Patch glanced back at the booth as she covered her eyes with her hand. I'm sorry, I don't understand why anyone would do this. Some people can't exist without getting even, Katie. They can't live with the fact they were beaten. Carlos Sánchez and his gang are those kind of people. He took her warm hand, and they slowly ascended the wide concrete ramp. The passageway, lighted by wire-encased, aqua-glowing halogens, wound upward through the ledge. A stiff, cooler wind blew Kate's hair back as they approached the open, gridded area. 100 feet ahead, the Venus-textured tea-green pyramid chamber angled upward toward a stone-carved dome. She put her arm around him as they advanced along the grid. Swirling fog fissures crept upward from a luminescent red rod cluster, glowing like a fiery furnace deep within the earth. Patch explained how the dilation fields pulsed through the transparent rods inside a rimmed hyperspace configuration 50 miles in diameter under the Colorado mountains. Kate gazed up at the sealed chrome hatchway at the prodigious chamber. Patch lifted a white plastic cover-up, revealing a keypad and a small screen. He quickly punched in a numerical sequence, and the bolt slid into the hatch frame. He clutched the surrounding chrome bar, but only nudged the hatch when he pulled. Again he gripped the chrome, but it only partially opened. "Squeeze by, Kate." She slid through the opening and Patch spun his body inside. The hatch ratcheted back in place. A protruding white grit pathway extended from an open area into a faint ultraviolet haze. Patch steered her across the wide area. Once this thing is in full operation, you don't walk down the path into the fields until you are suspended in the chamber. It's an odd feeling. I suppose it's like you're weightless. He stopped midway and faced her. Her teeth and eyes became heightened by the ultraviolet light. Then everything becomes weird. You can feel yourself being accelerated with the dilation. At that time, you're inside the bubble. Aren't you afraid when you're being brought back? You trust your people and the calculations. I've done it twice. It works. Come on. As the temperature dropped, he brought her closer to the gritty ramp. I suppose if it's really possible, at least we'll be together. I'm just afraid we'll get stuck in there. That's not how it works. You don't get stuck. It's called retrograde. He stopped for a moment and put his hands on her shoulders. When you're sent back, it's like everything gaining immense energy and momentum, tightening and then snapping back. The bubble, it snaps back just as well because I went back to the 70s. I'd still be there if the retrograde wasn't in effect. But things have not changed, Patch. Would you snap back with the changes in place? Yes, we'd be the only ones who knew that time had changed. When you're actually back in time, you see the area you're emerging into. It's shaded, like being in a developing picture. Everything is shaded as the bubble slowly materializes. There's an immovable dimensional barrier between the outside world and the bubble. And you move ahead. When you return in time, the world just starts up like a frozen video, and then you're back in time. Same thing happens in reverse. I keep telling myself you guys are somehow going to pull this off. I'm not sure we can do it. But we will have to warn everybody as to what will happen. Meynkewitz's voice echoed around the chamber. "Patch, get back up here, right now." Patch looked upward. "He sounds serious," said Kate. "He is." Personnel in green army fatigues packed the control room. Meinkewitz bounced between monitors and barked out orders. "Kill them, for Christ's sake," he shouted into her red telephone. "Ray, what's the matter?" Meinkewitz talked as he darted about. "We have problems outside. There are people shooting at the guard gate. Somebody knows about what we're doing in here. Security has been broken." Patch checked the orange console's power-up monitor. "Over 5 hours to power up." "I know that. We can just hold them back for a few hours." Patch worked the keyboard to form equations about actually landing back in time. Kate sat in the chair next to him as an image of the pyramid chamber formed on the blue screen. "Can you leave without fully powering up?" asked Kate. "Yes, but the problem is how far away you're going. If we plan on going back a week, I'll have the appropriate video and proof of what's going to happen. The power output can be tweaked with the navigation. That's what I'm setting up now. I'm not worried. Speak for yourself, Patch. Can we really change this? There'll be 2 of us back a week ago. You'll be in New York and I'll be on my way back from the meeting with Norcross. Plus, this is something called the Kurbinski self-consistency principle. It's the whole unanswered question of whether you can change time, and I'm not sure about that. What is Kurbinski? Having 2 of one person back there is a paradox. Kurbinski says if an event exists in time, it would give rise to a paradox. Then the probability of that event happening is 0. Space-time passes away inside that chamber, Kate. You and I going back to change this disaster is a part of the space-time line all along. I don't get it. It'd still be 2 of each of us. Whatever we might do, we will reach these non-paradoxical ideas like having 2 of us. Then we won't be there. Weren't there 2 of you in your trips back? Patch turned from the computer and smiled. Well, I never heard of Patch Kincaid. You never looked. Probability is 0. Harrington scampered around the consoles to Meinkewitz. Ray, I've just posted men in the connector tunnels and the doors are secured. Someone tipped these people off. They understand the importance of Sector 13. I kept telling the Army to defend this place, but they wouldn't listen. They're arrogant enough to believe that no one could find out about Sector 13. Give it an hour, Ray. Wonderful. Patch looked up from the screen. We need more time. I understand that, Patch. Meinkewitz stood and faced Harrington across the room. Just hold the sons of bitches off, Bill. Hold them off. Chapter 6. Sector 13, Hastings Mountain, Colorado. Lower Control Area, July 19th, 1986, 6:33 a.m. A constant barrage of mortar launches, automatic weapon fire, and exploding hand grenades rattled the tunnel security doors for 2 hours. The sheer bulk of the old military fortress's multiple doors repulsed the attack. With each successive thud and blast, Patch tapped his fingers on the power-up console. 3 styrofoam coffee cups sat on the surface. The caffeine in the attack had his nerves frayed. Any chance of going back in time would be thwarted if these people outside could locate the power lines near the doors. Meinkewitz worked frantically in the lower area, formulating a credible plan for Patch to execute once he emerged back in time. The techs informed him that the computers had stretched the estimated retrograde time beyond a month. On the forward monitor, they had prepared a video detailing the events of the past 12 hours. No matter where he landed in the world, needed to proceed to Sector 13 and contact Meinkewitz. The tape with a private message from Meinkewitz and Patch's own corroborating verbal account would alert the Meinkewitz of a month ago to the looming disaster. Patch leaned toward the outside perimeter monitor, scanning the forest. Like any other day, the sun had broken over the ridge. A cloudy residue inundated the air. Terrorists in beige camouflage uniforms milled around several green military vehicles, while another group hacked away at the charred tunnel doors. Patch pressed his lips and turned when he saw Meinkewitz walk past the monitors with a white plastic food tray in his hand. Meinkewitz sat down the tray loaded with sandwiches on the console. Without sustenance, we can't function. Patch grabbed a sandwich and quickly bit into the ham and cheese. I just pray we can get you two out of here before they break through. It's going to take a while before they get through those doors. Meinkewitz nodded and then crossed the room again. He conferred with 3 men at the far station. A few minutes later, he returned with a maroon leather briefcase, lifted it onto the table and popped the brass locks. A cellular phone box, a slim video machine, and a small portable computer filled the inside. Patch looked at Kate and then removed the computer. I haven't seen this slick model. Faster, it has a smaller chip. An entire intelligence schematic is inside. Meinkewitz picked up a tiny black book. Just in case, people and numbers to contact. The New York and San Francisco explosions are on the video. There should be no doubt in June that you've come from July, Kate said on the counter. What can you guys do 2 weeks ago that you couldn't do now? Meinkewitz drank the soda and burped. That's one hell of a question. I can only say that we'll have 2 weeks instead of a few hours. With the situation laid out, the names of the funeral house gang, I think we'll take whatever steps we need to prevent Armageddon. It's still a big chance, said Patch. We should go farther back. With a full power-up, yes, we don't have that luxury. And when we retrograde? When you retrograde, Patch, I'll try to align you as close to New York City as possible. I can't guarantee it, but if you see the city standing, and you come out of the bubble, you'll be successful. And if it's not, Meinkewitz did not answer. He studied a few readouts and then raised his hands into the air. Why the hell do we have warning lights on? I think they're coming through the ducts, Ray, shouted Harrington from the forward consoles. Meinkewitz banged the monitor. Jesus Christ, Dan. Patch left his half-bitten sandwich on the counter, took Kate's hand and stepped up to Meinkewitz and Harrington. On the larger screen, soldiers scrambled away from the tunnel doors and up the forested slope. A flushed Harrington, minus his coat and tie, ran up the ramp. The few armed personnel left within the complex momentarily held back the intruders near the upper air vents, but the terrorist had gunned down 4 of Meínkewitz's technicians. Harrington believed they might have 15 minutes before the entire outside force stormed into the lower area. "This is going to get ugly," said Meinkewitz, looking at a pink and green air duct schematic on the computer screen. He shook his head several times and mumbled something to Harrington. Harrington seemed to concur. Then he rushed back to Patch and held his shoulder. "Patch, I want you in the chamber now. Kate's going with me. I don't give a damn what you do. Just get your ass down there." He turned to his men across the room. "Get them terrain jackets." Patch went over to the first systems console for several minutes as he ran reports on the power levels. He shook his head as Meinkewitz appeared behind him with terrain jackets. Meinkewitz helped Kate with her jacket, but turned back to the screen as Patch slipped into his camouflage survival jacket. "Okay, Ray, you sure as hell know you can't send us back without some kind of power-up, and I don't see that in the reports." "Patch, those bastards are inside the mountain." "Forget them. How are you going to get us out of here?" "We'll handle that. Without a full power-up, you can put in coordinates. It won't take longer, but we can get you back a couple of weeks." "Don't bullshit me, Ray. You don't know that. I'm going at focus dilation without a power-up to get you back. That is a theory, and you could blow up this whole place." "Is that right? What do you think the terrorists are doing right now?" Meinkewitz put his hand on Patch's shoulder. "Patch, we have no other option." Meinkewitz closed the briefcase. He thrust his hand behind Patch's back and pushed him forward. Patch held the briefcase in one hand and opened the fire door. He grasped Kate's hand down the stairs to the chamber ramp. Brilliant warning lights flashed along the bottom wall and down the concrete stairs. An early departure might mess everything up and send them into parts unknown. They emerged from the stairwell door. Patch looked up to the control area high above him. Meinkewitz spoke in a booming, clear voice above the outside pyramid. "Where are you, Patch?" "We just left the stairs. Ray, listen. Get as close to power-up as you can." Meinkewitz, now at the window span, shouted into the speakers. "I'm going to boost the chamber up exponentially. It's the only way. Then we'll contain the power burst." "I've never seen a computer simulation of that," he called over his shoulder as he and Kate approached the chamber hatchway. "Never mind. Just get inside. You'll be fine." "Right." Harrington yelled in the background. "They're through. They're coming down the elevators." "Close the security doors, Dan," shouted Patch. Inside the upper glass, Meinkewitz spun his hand like a plane propeller. "Get in the damn chamber. I'll get in there myself." Patch grasped the briefcase handle and motioned Kate forward. Water beads coated the chamber's routed chrome hatch. He flipped the white wall box's plastic up and then entered the access code. Again he clawed at the edge, jarring it open. He motioned Kate forward. He helped her through and rotated his own body at the same time. The door sealed shut as a ubiquitous ultraviolet glare spread across the inner walls and fog ahead. "Will we make it, Patch?" "We'll make it, Katie." But he knew the dilation had never been started without complete power-up. Meinkewitz again came on the speakers. "I'm going to activate the rods now, Patch." "Okay." "At least we're together, Patch." "You're going back in time, Kate. We'll stop them before all this happened. This part will be easy." The persistent hum slowly diminished. Patch looked around the chamber. "What the hell's going on here?" Meinkewitz grumbled on the speaker. "What happened down there, Patch?" "I don't know," he said as his boots echoed across the floor. He pushed the speaker switch. "Ray, why did you cut off power?" "Just stay put, Patch. We'll figure it out. Those bastards are tampering with the lines coming in here." Patch exhaled and turned from the speaker. "He's going to need my help. Just stay right here, Katie. I'll be right back. Right back." "Patch, come on. You're safer here, believe me." He kissed her forehead and ran to the opening. At the hatch, he set down the briefcase and pushed against the door, nudging it open a few inches. Holding the briefcase, he ran back up the ramp and scrambled up the LCA stairs. When he opened the fire door, Meínkewitz's eyes opened wide. "Patch, what the hell are you doing up here? Get back inside the goddamn chamber." A dozen or more technicians turned toward Meinkewitz. At the system's console, Patch pushed buttons and got new readings as he studied the monitors. "Ray, we're not powered up. I bet you triggered the overload breakers in the Alpha computer." "Could take hours to determine that," said Meinkewitz. "Then I suggest we start. I'm going under the consoles to the Alpha readout." "That's insane." More explosions, closer now, violently shook the control room. "And I suggest if this doesn't power up in 5 minutes, we abort power up and take the escape transit into the valley." Patch shoved himself away from the console, then stomped across the room. He slid under an array of colored lights behind the main power-up console. He pulled at the bottom panel clip, just under the counter, finally forcing the panel to crash onto the floor. A long tube led to the junction linkage of the Alpha computer. Meinkewitz yelled from the outside as Patch crawled into the circuit tube's blue glow. The Alpha junction door, embedded in the right side of the tube, paralleled a series of cooling fans. He ripped off the door and tossed it across the tube. Red digits on the readout screen revealed a power drop and the severing of computer and SEC-9 power lines on the southern side of Sector 13. He called back through the muffled passageway. "Ray, get me some monitoring equipment so I can reroute the power." No response. "Ray, come on." Patch slid the inner door to the right and manually traced the power outage to a line near the outside security doors. He typed in the secondary route to a power input via the SEC-11 lines to the north. Almost instantaneously, the numbers stabilized. Meinkewitz could now activate the power-up. Patch did not bother with the Alpha panel and crept on his back up the tube to the LCA opening. "Ray, power up, Ray, power up!" With 2 automatic rifles pointed at his head, he backed out of the tube. He sat up in the brighter light and his stomach wrenched. 3 men in olive green uniforms controlled the booth and had shot at least a dozen Sector 13 personnel. A pug-nosed Latin man with peppered hair strutted his large frame into the room. He had ammo belts crossed over his chest, wet dusty black boots and an automatic weapon. Beard stubble covered his pudgy face and his dark eyes focused on Patch. "Who the hell are you?" asked Patch. "You don't question us," he said in a deep Spanish accent. "What do you want?" asked Meinkewitz. "This place has nothing for you." An older, sandy-haired soldier with deep smile lines etched over his oval face had either a German or Russian accent and walked across the booth, waving 2 pistols in his large hands. "We have secured the entire complex, Carlos. We have known about this place for 6 months. What are you doing here?" asked Carlos. Meinkewitz turned in his chair slightly. "It's a particle accelerator." "You are a fucking liar, mister. Haven't you ever heard of quantum physics? We were told you are launching weapons across space and time." "You have no right to be in here," shouted one of the technicians as he stepped toward Carlos. Carlos smiled and fired his weapon once, ripping apart the kid's head and his body bounced off the console. "You no-good son of a bitch," shouted Meinkewitz as he stood. "Is that what I am?" "I know who you are," said Meinkewitz. Patch eyed the blinking red light on the panel for the power-up. "You're wasting your time here." Carlos smiled as he marched up to Meinkewitz and slowly pushed the weapon barrel against his skull. "You don't tell me what to do." One of the technicians began moving toward Carlos, but the other soldier shot him several times with the pistol. The technician slid on his stomach and then Carlos shot him in the back. Patch edged closer to the power-up button. "You destroyed that country, you bastards," shouted Meinkewitz. "We have nothing left." "I don't like you," said Carlos. He fired at Meynkewitz's chest, throwing his body back in the chair. Blood oozed through his white shirt and he showed no movement. Patch glanced at Meinkewitz and then at Carlos. "You might as well kill me while you can." "You obeyed the brief, you wise ass." Carlos pushed Meynkewitz's limp body onto the bloody floor. "I need you to help me." Patch stared at the dead technicians, but he saw the red light flashing in his peripheral vision. In order to travel back in time, the power-up process needed to commence. Kate was still down there. If he could send her back, even without the briefcase, her resourcefulness would guide her to the Meinkewitz of the past. I have to shut down this place before we're all killed. Carlos's unshaven face and piercing coal eyes remained only a few inches away from Patch. What the hell are you talking about? I don't understand. Because if I don't stop the overload, this place is going to blow sky high. This is a classified installation. Missile defense, lied Patch. This place is powered by a nuclear reactor that's about to melt down. You need to let me fix this. Why should I believe you? Do you really want to run the risk of being wrong, Carlos? Carlos thought and motioned with one of his guns. You do what you have to do, but if you do anything against us, you will be executed. Understood. Patch sidestepped the lifeless Meinkewitz. His stomach jolted when he inadvertently stepped in Menkiewicz's blood. He leaned over the console and simply set the power-up sequence back in place. The power-up systems quickly cranked, shaking the booth. He wondered whether Meinkewitz had already set the power burst into the chamber. On the smaller timer, in the lower portion of the screen, the orange digits indicated Kate would be catapulted back in time in 2 minutes and 20 seconds. The officer pulled at Patch's sleeve and passed the gun onto his cheek. Who are you? Patch pushed his lips together and stared at his captor. Captain Robert G. Kincaid. I work here. The chamber brightened green. What's happening down there? It sounds louder now. I don't want any tricks. It's winding down. It'll glow for a few minutes and then shut off. Another soldier appeared in the door. The upper area is secure. Good, said Carlos. He turned toward Patch. You had better not be lying. We have an overload situation up here. In 1 minute and 11 seconds, the chamber would dilate, sending Kate back in time. Carlos seemed confused. This is suspicious. It's not working. You people made me wait too long. The chamber is gonna blow. This whole place will be destroyed unless I deactivate it from the inside. Carlos looked down toward the chamber and then faced Patch. Deactivate! Deactivate! Patch ran from the booth, but the soldiers followed him into the stairwell. He questioned whether he could enter the chamber before power-up. With their weapons held upright, Carlos and Eric trailed him from the stairwell toward the chamber. As the concrete rocked with the power-up, Patch sprinted toward the chamber. He turned abruptly and motioned his hands toward the floor. Everybody down! Down! Carlos and the others leaped to the floor as Patch reached the chamber and entered the security numbers. The door loosened slightly as a massive rush of steam and wind pushed outside. He fought the onslaught and slipped into the swirling mass. The hatch slammed shut. Someone pounded from the outside of the hatch. Patch turned and sprinted into the brightening fog. Maybe Kate had leaped into the displacement. Carlos Sánchez called his name through the speakers. Kincaid! Kincaid! Patch did not see Kate as he jogged down the gritty walkway. He knew what would happen ahead. Hesitation would get him killed. Meinkewitz would have told him to go forward. For a third time, Patch Kincaid disappeared into the time dilation field's shifting nebulous gases. He no longer heard the taunting terrorist as he continued to call for Kate within the clouds. Kate! 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 Without the briefcase, his story would be challenged. He soon sensed movement and weightlessness within the timeless morass. Minus food and water, he could die. Then he worried about Kate's pathway back in time. Yet explaining everything to the Meinkewitz of 2 weeks ago with no proof presented a major problem. And what of Korbinski's self-consistency principle and the dual identities for both Kate and himself in this time period? What if nobody believed him and he could not change time? History would then play out, again annihilating United States cities. Crackpots told intelligence agencies wild stories all the time. He would find himself dead if they questioned his story. And what if he and Kate had traveled alternate routes back into the past? It might be impossible to find her unless she went right to Meinkewitz. The fog whipped around him, varying in shades of gray and complete darkness. He spun into a slow, weightless tumble, and once again began his journey back in time. Chapter 7. Northern Hemisphere, winter, Late morning. Location unknown. Cold air brought him to consciousness, like a slowly developing photograph inside a shaded barrier. Moistened maple leaves, bordered by a foot of snow, melted at the edges, gradually surrounded him. The area remained shaded as the energy slowly diminished and the bubble barrier separated him from the outside world. At first he felt the cold breeze. Hardwood trees, branches bare to the blue sky, followed a rock-strewn slope to the adjacent ridges. Water droplets dripped from the branches. A squirrel quickly scurried up a maple, dove off the upper branches and soared to a neighboring tree. Several blue jays darted through the winter air as a flock of geese formed an arrow-shaped formation over a distant ice-covered pond. He stood and cupped his hands. His voice echoed down the slope toward the hills beyond. "Kate! Kate!" Alone in the forest with an occasional windburst, sometimes moving through the frozen boughs and branches, his exact location remained obscure, but hope beckoned with a dissipating campfire or chimney smoke meandering through the forest. He zipped his camouflage jacket and started down the snow-hardened slope. "Kate! Kate!" He reached an ice-caked stream where the slopes converged and placed his boot on the slick rocks. The stream, like time itself, narrowly cascaded over the smooth rocks, golden in the winter light. Smoke, now heavier in the clean air, lured him forward as he carefully tiptoed over the slippery boulders to the far riverbank. Kate's location eluded him as the hours dragged on with no sign of a trail in the pristine snow. At worst, she might not have survived the embarking chamber. He balanced like a gymnast along the angled slope. His ears stung as he now placed his hands under his warmer armpits and followed the smoke scent. He scurried toward the ridges ahead. At midday, the sunlight pushed through the evergreen branches and the hill shadows darkened the stream. The creek wound into a brighter forested canyon ahead. When he climbed onto the thin rock ledge, he gazed at the water cascading toward a rolling plain. Beyond the plain, the snow-sprinkled mountains rimmed the horizon. He paralleled a weathered rock between the hardwoods. The ground slowly leveled into a field with yellow-cut corn stalks stuck solid in the snow. Like he had in high school track, Patch hurdled the next stone wall and landed in the field. A singular white plume from a long shed billowed into the cloudless air at the far end of the field. His boots crunched the snow as he marched toward the shed. With each stride, his thoughts centered on Kate in retrograde. Near the edge of the field, the silver maple trees, spiked with metal spigots, dipped infinitesimal droplets into hanging galvanized buckets. A white farmhouse and a weathered wood barn rose like the morning sun behind the elongated wood shed. Steam burst out the rear windows and dissipated into the cold air as men in denim overalls scurried in and out of the shed. Along the muddy yard, one of the men removed a tool from a shiny cherry-red Dodge pickup and then proceeded into the shed. In his military fatigues and terrain jacket, Patch trudged across the matted snow. Smoke gushed out the shed's black stovepipe and settled across the yard. Through the shed's open doors, the steam ascended from the long metal vats, and a rich maple odor inundated the air. A lanky man, about his age, in a red plaid shirt, looked up from the vat. He wiped his forehead with a navy handkerchief and walked outside. "You all right, mister?" "I think so." He extended his warm, firm hand. "Hey, Wilton Jeffries." Patch spoke quickly. "Captain Robert Kincaid." "Captain!" Jeffries guided him into the moist, warm air. Your plane crash or something, Captain?" "We were on a training flight last night. I got my signals crossed and bailed out, Mr. Jeffries. I need to get to my unit." "Well, damn." "I landed in the hills. I estimated 50 miles from the drop-off point," said Patch, pointing across the field. "I've been outside for 4 or 5 hours." "Well, you're damn lucky you weren't out there during the nor'easter." "You have a phone?" "Sure. Must be looking for you by now, Captain." "Maybe." Jeffries motioned him forward. Patch stepped onto the wet floorboards and walked behind the men working in the vats. Jeffries sent him into a side office. A black rotary phone lay atop an invoice stack on an oak roll-top desk. "You're welcome to the phone, Captain. Get back to your unit. They'll think you're AWOL. Got that right," he said, rubbing his hands. Patch lifted the receiver as Jeffries wandered back to the vats. He put his index finger into the rotary dial and tried Meínkewitz's Sector 13 office number. The dial clicked each number in slow motion and he grinned. Speed or auto dialing had not yet reached this area. But the earpiece produced an odd series of tones. Then an operator asked him for the number he dialed, claiming he had dialed too many digits, and she wanted him to explain the Colorado area code. Frustrated, he sat on the desk as he tried to explain. As he looked at a photograph of a bright red fire engine and firehouse located in Centerville, Vermont, he loosened his grip on the phone. On the calendar, days crossed off in pencil indicated today's date. Friday, February 24th, 1961. He gently set the receiver back on the hook, no longer upset with the operator, and carefully touched the calendar. Going back a few weeks would have allowed him to contact Meinkewitz. Then the intelligence community could launch an assault on the funeral house gang or on any related terrorist organizations. Measures would be taken to prevent the catastrophic events. In 1961, Meinkewitz, a young man, lived in a country where John F. Kennedy had just won the November election. Jeffries popped his head in the side office. "You get through all right?" "Yeah, no, not yet. I have to find..." "Hey, listen, let my wife fix you something to eat." Patch nodded and followed Jeffries from the office. But he turned one more time and looked back at the 1961 calendar. How would he find Meinkewitz now? He staggered from the steam into the cold air. Jeffries led him across the hardened dirt tracks near some roving chickens, and they climbed the farmhouse's back steps. Jeffries opened the scuffed door and they stepped into a warm hallway. The smell of ham and potatoes wafted into the hall. Jeffries chuckled as he put his hand on Patch's shoulder. "You just might be a little hungry, eh, Captain?" "A little." Patch grinned and brushed his feet on the matted rug. He followed Jeffries into a sweltering kitchen with foggy windows and a number of pots boiling on a cast-iron stove. A young woman, large-framed and wearing a flowery dress and apron, walked from the living room as a soap opera played on the bulky Emerson black-and-white TV in the corner. "Wilton, you have a military guest?" "Becky, this is Captain Kincaid. He wandered off from his unit." Patch lightly shook Becky's hand. "Ma'am, you're going to catch yourself the death of cold, Captain, out there with no protection. Just like President Kennedy giving his inaugural speech last month in that freezing Washington weather. No hat, no coat." Patch stared at the yellow-framed, wall-mounted clock above the sink and studied the minute hand's perpetual movement forward. President Kennedy. "Well, I voted for Nixon," said Jeffries. "He had the experience, although Eisenhower didn't say that. Everyone said he lost them debates. I listened to one of them coming back from New York." "Yeah, that's where we were, Becky. Nixon won it hands down." Becky stirred one of the pots. "They said Nixon looked bad on TV." "Who cares about how you look? I think my wife voted for Kennedy. She ain't saying, but he swooned her. I know he did." "Well, I'm not telling. That's between me and the voting booth." She smiled broadly. "Can I get you some chicken soup, Captain?" "Soup would hit the spot. It's cold out there." Patch joined Jeffries, washing his hands at the ceramic sink. He wondered how long he could remain back here before retrograde ripped him back to 1986. How would the Meinkewitz of 1961, now younger than Patch, change the events in 1986? At the round oak table, Becky, like a waitress in a hometown restaurant, served the steamy soup with heavy, thick dumplings and chicken chunks. She set his black coffee on the table. A desperate, sinking inner feeling filled his gut as he sipped the broth off the oversized spoon and dreaded Kate had not survived the trip back in time. Then he brought the hot coffee to his lips. As Becky talked with Jeffries, his eyes wandered from the yellow and black wallpaper to the old white sink and back to the soup. He had no money, no way to get money, and he sat in military fatigues at some kitchen table in rural Vermont. His life consisted of a fabricated story about losing his unit. All his conversations with Meinkewitz could not help shake loose his mentor's location in February 1961. The ever-present threat of being retrograded back to Bonheim and Carlos Sánchez at Sector 13 resided in his consciousness like a corrosive acid. Far back in time, Patch has met Wilton Jeffries and his wife Becky in Centerville, Vermont. Next week, Patch will formulate a plan that will include Ray Meinkewitz in the tracking down of the terrorist Carlos Sánchez in 1961. All the while, retrograde, the sword of Damocles, threatens to catapult Patch back to the present time. I'm Robert P. Fitton. Time to board the plane, folks. I'll be here next week, and we'll step into the world of 1961, where John F. Kennedy is president and Cuba has become a gigantic threat. Until then, adios! All of my books are available in paperback, Kindle, and audio at www.fittonbooks.com, or you can look at the list of audiobooks separately at pizzazz-pizzazz.com. All of my books are available in paperback, Kindle, and audio at www.fittonbooks.com, or you can look at the list of audiobooks separately at pizzazz-pizzazz.com.